Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Karen Sutton, the president of the League of Women Voters of North County, San Diego. Welcome to our program this afternoon on the new Voters' Choice voting model that's currently being implemented in San Diego County. Our guest this afternoon is Registrar of Voters, Cynthia Paes. Cynthia is the new San Diego County Registrar as of November of last year, having previously served as the interim registrar since January of 2021. Prior to that time, she was the assistant registrar of voters. The California Voters' Choice Act became law in 2016 and was adopted for the County of San Diego by the Board of Supervisors in October of last year, a relatively short time ago. As you'll hear, the Voters' Choice Act expands voting choices and provides additional support for voters, including ensuring that all registered voters receive mail-in ballots, but there's so much more to it. Cynthia and her team have been working to develop and implement the plan for the vote centers and have undertaken a significant outreach effort in order to execute the change in a relatively short time frame. We hope that our league's outreach and voter education programs will support their efforts to ensure a successful implementation. So we're very pleased to have her with us this afternoon to explain what this is all about. Following Cynthia's presentation, we'll have a Q&A session moderated by myself and Ann Olmstead. Please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Welcome, Cynthia.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you all so much for your time today. Today's presentation is to inform you of the county's transition to the Voters' Choice Act. We will discuss voting trends, your voting options, and how we plan to conduct future elections under the Voters' Choice Act in San Diego County. This presentation has also been provided throughout the county at public consultation meetings, targeting the disability communities and minority language communities, including Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Arabic, Japanese, and Korean speakers, as well as political and advocacy group meetings and 2 public hearings. Next slide. Under the Voters' Choice Act, every active registered voter in San Diego County will continue to automatically receive a ballot in the mail nearly a month before Election Day, just like we have experienced during the last 2 statewide elections conducted under pandemic conditions. Also, under state law, all polling place counties will also need to mail every active registered voter a ballot as well. So this doesn't only apply to Voters' Choice Act counties, but also traditional polling place counties. Voters will continue to choose when, where, and how they vote. Elections are no longer a one-day event, and there is no need to wait until Election Day to vote. Voters can return their ballot in the mail, at a secure ballot drop box location, or at any vote center in the county. Your mail ballot return envelope is postage paid, so there's no need for a stamp. Voters will also have the option to vote in person at any one of 200 plus larger vote centers located across the county. Next slide. Why the change? The Voters' Choice Act is designed to make voting more accessible and convenient. It is also in response to voter behavior and voting preferences in the county. These considerations influence the County Board of Supervisors to vote unanimously for the transition to the Voters' Choice Act at its October 19, 2021 board meeting. The vote center model under the Voters' Choice Act will begin this year with the April 5th, 2022 special vacancy election for Assembly District 80, and then countywide for the June 7th, 2022 gubernatorial primary election. For the purposes of this presentation, we will focus on the countywide requirements for the June primary election. The following 2 slides will demonstrate this change in behavior and preference over time in San Diego County. here you can see, there we go. Here you can see a steady increase in San Diego County voters choosing to vote by mail. Out of the over 1.9 million registered voters in San Diego County, over 80% had signed up to become a permanent vote by mail voter, meaning they have chosen to automatically receive a ballot in the mail for every election prior to the county's implementation of the Voters' Choice Act. Now, every active registered voter will continue to automatically receive a ballot in the mail. You will no longer need to sign up to become a vote by mail voter. Next slide. This chart shows the dramatic shift taking place right around the 2010 election cycle, with the number of voters who voted using their mail ballot outnumbering those who voted in person. There has been a steady increase in voting by mail since that time, and the underutilization of polling places has become more and more apparent. In the March 3rd, 2020 presidential primary election, conducted under the traditional neighborhood polling place model, 72% of those who turned out voted using their mail-in ballot. In-person voting lessened further during the pandemic, with 88% of voters voting their mail ballot and only 12% voting in person during the presidential general election, and most recently, 92% voting their mail ballot during the September 14th, 2021 California gubernatorial recall election. Next slide. According to the California Secretary of State's office, 26 counties in California have already implemented or will implement the Voters' Choice Act in 2022. These 26 counties represent over 62% of California's registered voters. San Diego County will be joining the ranks of other large counties such as Los Angeles and Orange. Next slide. How is voting changing? For San Diego County, it really isn't. If you've voted in the last two elections, countywide elections, it will be a very similar experience. Again, all active registered voters will automatically receive a ballot in the mail nearly a month before Election Day. Accessible vote by mail is available for all voters, and in-person voting will be available over multiple days. Voters in San Diego County are already familiar with the vote center model because the Registrar's Office conducted the November 2020 presidential general and the September 2021 recall election under a VCA-like model, where again, every active registered voter received a ballot in the mail with those instructions, and those who preferred or needed to vote in person were able to visit one of 200 plus voting locations open for 4 days across the county. The Registrar's Office also ran a robust media campaign in conjunction with voter outreach for both VCA-like elections. For all future elections, neighborhood polling places will be replaced with larger and more accessible vote centers, with select vote centers being open for up to 11 days, and will provide more services to voters. Next slide. I would like to touch on remote accessible vote by mail a bit more here. The RAVBM system is most commonly used by voters with disabilities or voters deployed overseas serving in the military. The system allows a voter to request and receive access to a remote accessible vote by mail system. It allows the voter to download their ballot onto a personal computer and mark their ballot privately and independently using their own assistive technology. After marking their ballot, voters will have the option to review their choices. After reviewing, the voter will then print and return their ballot using the printable envelope template included in their RAVBM instructions. Just like any vote by mail ballot, RAVBM ballots must be sealed inside an envelope and returned by mail or at any vote center or official ballot drop box location. Remember, you must sign your envelope for the ballot to count. It's just like any other mail-in ballot. Next slide. What are vote centers? Vote centers replace polling places, and they will offer more services. Voters can vote at any vote center across the county. There will no longer be assigned locations. All vote center locations will be listed in your voter information pamphlet that is sent to your home and will also be available at sdvote.com. For convenience, the 1 or 2 vote centers near your home will be listed in your official mail ballot materials. Under the Voters' Choice Act, vote centers will be open multiple days and hours. Some vote centers will be open up to 11 days, and all 200 plus vote centers will be open 4 days, including Election Day. This provides voters with more flexibility in casting their ballot. Next slide. Under current voter registration total, San Diego County is required to have a minimum of 195 vote centers open for 4 days. This is represented by the blue arrow for the June election. Of those approximately 195 vote centers, 39 would be open a full 11 days, including Election Day. The leading 7 days is represented by the pink arrow. Under the Voters' Choice Act, counties must provide 1 vote center for every 10,000 registered voters open for 4 days, and 1 vote center for every 50,000 registered voters open for 11 days. San Diego County anticipates having more than the minimum number of vote centers available for the June primary election. Next slide. Vote centers are a one-stop shop. Here are some of the services available. All vote centers will have a full deployment of touchscreen ballot marking devices, which have the capability to bring up every ballot type in the election. The ballot marking device is what allows you to be able to vote at any location in the county. For example, in the November 2020 presidential general election, there were over 4,000 variations of the ballot. Those you could pull up on any ballot marking device at any location. The ballot marking device allows election workers to pull up the voter's correct ballot type, and the voter can continue with the English ballot or select one of the 4 federally covered languages. The ballot marking device does not tabulate or count any votes, and it does not store any voter information. After the voter confirms their selections, the voter must print out their official ballot on the paired printer inside the voting booth and place it in the ballot box to be counted at the registrar's office. That is their official ballot. Next slide. The county's ballot marking device is fully compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act and lets voters go through their ballot independently and privately with a touchscreen tablet with options to change the text size and contrast, a handheld controller with Braille, headphones and audio instructions in English, Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese, privacy mask for voters who are blind or with low vision to ensure their votes are kept private as they go through the audio instructions, and the ability to use their own paddle or sip and puff assistive devices. Next slide. Vote centers provide voting assistance in multiple languages, and with the use of the electronic poll books and a full deployment of ballot marking devices, these centers allow voters to update their registration or register to vote and cast a ballot the same day. Under the traditional polling place model, voters had to vote on Election Day at their assigned polling place. Those who did not go to their assigned polling place had to vote provisionally. Vote centers nearly eliminate the need to cast a provisional ballot. Lastly, if you didn't receive your ballot in the mail, or if you made a mistake on your ballot, you can stop by any vote center to cast a replacement ballot using the ballot marking device. Next slide. The Registrar of Voters will follow the county's public health orders that are in place at the time of the election. And we already have established protocols to ensure the health and safety of election workers, voters, and observers to our office, vote centers, and mail ballot drop box locations. Masks and gloves are available for all visitors and election workers. Hand sanitizer readily available when entering or exiting the vote center. Election workers will be provided N95 masks and in some cases, face shields. There will be regular cleaning and disinfecting of frequently touched objects and surfaces. We will continue to encourage voters to wear a facial covering, maintain a comfortable distance, avoid gathering in groups, and follow all signs and directions from election workers. These protocols, of course, will evolve depending on the current public health order and guidance in place. Next slide. What are ballot drop boxes? San Diego County's ballot drop box program was implemented in 2014 to provide an additional service to voters. This program continued to grow and now under the Voters' Choice Act provides another secure, accessible, and convenient option for voters to return their mail ballot. Counties must provide one ballot drop box for every 15,000 registered voters. For the June 2022 election, San Diego County will have a combination of standalone and secure ballot drop boxes and staffed ballot drop-off locations. Under current registration totals, we anticipate a minimum of 130 ballot drop box locations open between May 9th and Election Day. Drop boxes are clearly marked with official ballot drop box in English and in our 4 federally covered languages. The hours will vary at our staffed ballot drop box locations. You will want to check sdvote.com for the days and hours before heading out to drop off your ballot. Next slide. Ballots start going out in the mail on Monday, May 9th. If your mailing and residence addresses are up to date with our office, you should expect to receive your ballot that same week. And ballot drop box locations will open that same day. Next slide. We are still in the request for proposal process for our ballot drop boxes. That's why I mentioned it will be still a combination. We may only have a handful of these installed and ready to go for the June primary. So you will probably see mostly our staffed locations, staffed with 2 people. But here are a few examples. This example is actually from LA County. This is their design. A few design and security features we are looking into is durable material to withstand vandalism and weather, securely fastened to prevent removal or tampering, robust locking mechanism for both the ballot slot and storage compartment to ensure ballots cannot be tampered with while in the box, nor be removed by anyone other than the registrar's staff. Be easily recognized by voters with the registrar's official branding, and we are targeting locations with video security monitoring. So that's just a sample for you to look at. Next slide. There are many considerations when it comes to selecting and securing both vote centers and ballot drop box locations. Here are some we must take into account under the Voters' Choice Act. We also consider availability of free parking, path of travel to the voting room, and the overall accessibility of the location. To more efficiently consider these data points, the Registrar's Office is utilizing the Center for Inclusive Democracy citing tool to help identify optimal vote center and ballot drop box locations across the county. You can access this tool and provide suggestions on our website at sdvote.com under Voters Choice Act. On the next few slides, I will briefly review how this demographic and voter data at the community level comes together to provide those optimal areas to site locations across the county. Next slide. Our first key consideration is public transit stops. This map provides a breakdown of public transit stops throughout the county. Again, this is the citing tool we're using, and you can look at all of these data points on the county map. Next slide. Here is a breakdown of communities with historically low vote by mail usage. The areas in yellow had the lowest rate of vote by mail usage during the 2020 election cycle. Next slide. This map shows the population density for San Diego County. The darker the color, the higher the population density. Next slide. This map outlines the areas with limited English proficiency. Again, the dark blue areas have the highest percentage of population of those with limited English proficiency. Next slide. This map shows population of voters with disabilities. The darker colors show a higher percent of the population. Next slide. This map outlines the percent of population with vehicle access. The dark blue areas have the highest vehicle ownership. When citing locations, we will focus on areas that are lighter in color, such as the yellow areas, which have the lowest rates of vehicle ownership. Next slide. Another important factor we take into consideration are the low-income communities. This map outlines the percentage of population in poverty. Next slide. This map outlines the communities with those eligible to vote, but are not registered to vote. The darker the color, the higher percent of those eligible, but not registered to vote. Next slide. In addition, we consider geographically isolated populations such as American Indian reservations. This map outlines all the Indian reservations in San Diego County. Next slide. And finally, with all these factors taken into consideration, this map presents all the potential areas to site vote centers and mail ballot drop boxes, with the darker areas being more desirable. Each of these squares covers a half-mile radius, so the area may be optimal, but there may not be an appropriate facility in that area to host a vote center. This is a great tool in identifying areas to get us started in our research, but it does have its limitations. Again, you could access this tool at sdvote.com on the Voters Choice Act page. There you will also find instructions on how to use the tool. You can type in your suggested facility address and see how it compares. Next slide. The Center for Inclusive Democracy tool also provides suggested areas for 4-day vote centers and mail ballot drop boxes. Here we are displaying the map that shows suggested areas for vote centers. It doesn't have all the answers, and there are still factors that we must consider, but the tool does provide a valuable resource in helping to guide our decisions and our selection process. Next slide. We are still not done with our search. We're still trying to finalize these locations for the June election, but we would like to give you a preview. Here you can see many of our proposed vote center locations. The locations we have been able to confirm for the June election are identified with the green dots, and the locations pending confirmation are identified with yellow. You can find the draft list of confirmed locations on our website at sdvote.com under the Voters' Choice Act. Again, this is not a complete list. We are still in the process of reviewing public input and securing locations. In the end, we will have over the minimum of 195 locations for the June primary. Next slide. Oh, let me stay on that, have a suggestion slide, stay on that one. The development, I think I jumped ahead. The development of the election administration plan under the Voters' Choice Act is a collaborative process with our advocacy groups and in public consultation with the general public. This is one of the tools we have available for folks to provide suggestions for vote centers and ballot drop box locations. We have the same type of form displayed here for our ballot drop boxes also. You can submit your suggestions on our website at sdvote.com under the Voters' Choice Act page. Please be aware that the final selection of vote centers and ballot drop box locations will be based on availability of the location, overall suitability, and its capacity to meet state mandated requirements. Okay, next slide. Oops. There we go. Sorry. Now I'd like to take a few minutes to provide a high-level summary of our voter outreach and education program, as well as our overall communication plan. The overall strategy is to inform San Diego County voters of their voting options through an expansive approach to reach as many voters as possible, multiple times through a variety of activities and tactics. The county's approach will include voter education workshops and participation in community events, meetings and presentations with interested organizations and community partners, advertising buys, news stories, interviews, and press conferences, public service announcements, social media toolkits, and more. Next slide. The Registrar's Office already has a robust voter education and outreach program with 5 dedicated full-time staff, along with an additional 18 to 20 seasonal staff during election cycles. Our program coordinators have strong and well-established partnerships with community leaders and stakeholders, and we have continued to seek new partnerships. It has been challenging during the pandemic, but historically we have participated in well over 300 community events and meetings each year. Through 2020 and 2021, much of this work was done virtually, and with COVID-19 still looming, we will continue using a virtual platform as appropriate. We have been slowly returning to in-person community events and meetings and hope in the near future we will be able to return to even more, including the monthly USCIS citizenship ceremonies. In addition, the Registrar's Office has already established relationships with county detention facilities and the probation department to provide voter registration training, election information, news stories, flyers, and posters, updates, and we remain available to answer questions of staff as they assist voters throughout the year. We also coordinate the receipt of voter registrations, distribution of ballots, including conditional voter registration, and the return of ballots for each election cycle at these facilities. And many of you are already aware, but we provide volunteer training to outside organizations that have made arrangements with the Sheriff's Department to register individuals at the county detention facilities, and we'll continue to work with the community organizations to see how we can support efforts to educate those released on parole. Next slide. The Registrar's media campaign is just one aspect of the overall communication plan and outreach strategy. Our advertising tactics include, but they are not limited to, newspaper, digital, and social media ads, direct mailings to registered voters, educational videos, radio and audio ads, outdoor posters, news stories, and interviews. In addition to reaching the general market, this robust media campaign will feature in-language ads and target hard-to-reach communities, including low voter turnout areas and underserved populations. All advertisements will also serve Spanish, Filipino, Vietnamese, and Chinese speakers. The language and artwork can also be shared with outside organizations to produce their own translated materials. As I mentioned before, the voting options under the Voters' Choice Act is not new for San Diego County voters. We have leveraged our voter engagement activities and voter exposure gained through the last two statewide elections, as well as outreach campaigns associated with those elections to support our efforts moving forward. Next slide. During the November 2020 election cycle, the Registrar's Office sent 2 direct mailings to registered voters, informing them of the upcoming changes in the election and their voting options. We placed 165 newspaper ads across 43 different newspapers in San Diego County, including in-language newspapers. We ran nearly 450 audio ads across 12 different radio stations, including in-language outlets, plus additional streaming ads. In addition to traditional and digital advertising, the Registrar's Office strategically utilized large outdoor posters on the exterior walls of gas stations, convenience stores, and bodegas located in underserved neighborhoods. In total, we placed posters around 45 different locations in San Diego County. We created 4 poster designs, each poster including English, messaging, and featured a language that was represented in that specific neighborhood. This tactic allows the Registrar's Office to target neighborhoods where other forms of traditional media can't always reach. Additional digital media included 5 email blasts, display ads, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter ads targeting general market, federally covered languages, and communities of color. We also developed and aired 30 public service announcements available in the 5 languages. This campaign delivered over 90 million impressions. Next slide. During the most recent September 2021 recall election, we placed 35 newspaper ads across 28 different newspapers in San Diego County, including in-language newspapers. We placed audio ads across 12 different radio and streaming stations, including in-language outlets, and ran approximately 1,500 ads on traditional radio. In addition to traditional and digital advertising, the Registrar's Office again utilized the large outdoor posters in underserved neighborhoods based on targeted zip code selections. We found this to be a successful tactic in 2020. In total, we placed posters at 65 different locations across San Diego County. Additional digital media included 2 email blasts, display ads, Facebook, and Twitter ads, again targeting our general market and communities of interest. This campaign delivered over 57 million impressions. Both campaigns inform San Diego County voters of their voting options consistent with the Voters' Choice Act, including that all active registered voters will automatically receive a ballot in the mail nearly a month before Election Day. Voters can return that ballot by mail at any mail ballot drop box location or voting location, and in-person voting was available over multiple days at 200 plus locations across the county. These 2 statewide elections gave San Diego County quite the advantage as we now officially transition to the Voters' Choice Act. The county has already gone to great lengths to prepare voters for any changes they may find in the upcoming elections, and now those changes are permanent. Next slide. Here are just a few examples of eye-catching advertisements that we created and used in the recall election. We will continue with this color scheme and incorporate the Voters' Choice Act messaging. And now let's move on to some of those mailers you should be expecting to see. Next slide. The registrar's office will be sending every active registered voter a postcard starting February 28th to reinforce available voting options and to ask voters to make sure their voter registration is up to date with our office. Another postcard will also be sent just prior to the vote center's opening in May. Next slide. We will start sending the voter information pamphlets to all registered voters on April 28th. I hope you all take some time to review yours when you receive it. This pamphlet will again reinforce messaging related to voting options and include information related to contests on your ballot, as well as include a complete list of vote centers and ballot drop box locations across the county. Next slide. The registrar's office will start mailing your official mail ballot packet on May 9th. This packet will include an insert with voting instructions and will again include messaging informing voters of their voting options. As a convenience, it will also include the 1 or 2 vote centers and mail ballot drop box locations near the voter's home. There will be a total of 4 mailings going out describing your voting options, along with and in conjunction with a robust voter outreach and media campaign. Now let's take a look at some important dates on the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, the Voters' Choice Act requires us to create an election administration plan through a collaborative process of public input. And my lights just went out in my office. Sorry about that. And in consultation with the registrar's advisory committees. The plan describes how the registrar's office will administer elections under the Voters' Choice Act. The draft plan will describe voting options, voter services, voting technology, security, outreach and education, and the process of selecting vote centers and ballot drop box locations. The draft version of the election administration plan is available for public review and comment on our website, sdvote.com. After consideration of all public input related to both the draft and amended plans, the final adopted plan will be posted on our website on March 8th. Once final, the plan will be submitted to the California Secretary of State's office, which must review and approve the outreach and education portion of the plan. You can provide us your comments, feedback, or recommendations anytime through March 6th at sdvote.com. Just click on the Voters' Choice Act page. Next slide. We met with our advisory committees back in December to get their input on how we should move forward. Over 16 public consultation meetings have taken place over the last 2 months. The registrar's office held 2 public hearings to receive public input into the development of the election administration plan. The last day to provide public comment is March 6th. You can provide your comments anytime at sdvote.com. Just click on the Voters' Choice Act page and enter your comments or suggestions on the available online forms or survey. Moving forward, the registrar's office will be hosting voter education workshops targeting disability and minority language communities, as well as additional workshops targeting communities of color and Arabic and Somali speaking communities, which is above and beyond the state and federal requirements. Next slide. I want to finish up here reminding everyone to be vote ready. Make sure the registrar's office mails your ballot to the correct address. Verify your residence address and, if different, your mailing address. You can verify your voter information, register or re-register to vote online at sdvote.com. Whether you are new to San Diego County or you just moved down the street, you must re-register to vote. You can do this by completing a new registration form, next slide, right here at sdvote.com. Don't delay in doing this. Either check your registration, make sure it's up to date, or re-register. Preparations for mailing your voting materials begin nearly 2 months before Election Day, so make sure your information is up to date. Go to sdvote.com, click on I want to in the drop-down menu, and click on Check My Registration. If you need to re-register, you can do that too. It just takes about 2 minutes to fill out the new registration form. Next slide. Again, feedback can be provided on the registrar's website, on the Voters Choice Act page, or by email at rovmail@sdcounty.ca.gov. Written comments should be addressed to the San Diego County Register of Voters at the address listed on the screen. Please remember, for official election information in San Diego County, visit sdvote.com and follow the registrar's office on Twitter. Thank you all for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was a great presentation, very thorough. And as I mentioned, a lot of work has happened in the last few months in a very short time frame. So we appreciate the work that everybody in the registrar's office is doing. Ann Olmsted will be joining us in just a second for the question and answers. And while she's coming on, I would also just like to welcome, we have a number of members here from the San Diego League of Women Voters, including Kim Knox is in the audience, as well as Jean Wiedner, the chair of their voter empowerment committee. So we have a lot of people who will be very interested in helping implement these changes. So this is great information. What we'll do is take questions in the Q&A. We have a number queued up here. Let's see, Ann's just logging in, so checking in. So I'm going to start, and then Ann and I will alternate. The first question has to do with illicit private ballot collection boxes that have appeared sometime in the past. How can the registrar protect voters from dropping those ballots in those boxes if they show up again in these upcoming elections?
Through all of our communications, we encourage voters to only return your ballot to a trusted source, and that's the U.S. Postal Service or one of our official ballot drop boxes, or at any vote center or our office. So we encourage that messaging. If we are told that there are unattended drop boxes popping up out there, we will put an end to it. We will engage the appropriate organizations like the Secretary of State and the District Attorney's Office to put an end to that. If there, we have heard of some locations that you're handing it over to a person, and there is a process for that, that the individual collecting that from you, that you're entrusting your ballot with, needs to also sign the back of the envelope. So they should go through that same process. Even if it appears to be, we never encourage this, so let me make that clear. But if organizations do kind of pop up and want to collect ballots from voters to get them to us, there are rules surrounding that, the amount of time they must take to get it to us, and they need to fill out the envelope as well. But it's not something I would ever encourage.
Thank you. And
Thank
Ann
you.
has joined us. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
Ann.
Hi, Cynthia. Good to see you again. Let me ask you another question. Will a new voter registration application be printed? And if so, can we use the old ones until we run out? Because we have stacks of the old ones left over from the last election.
So yes, you can use them. It's just you want to be sensitive to the fact, because it's not updated with Prop 17 with the parolee information. It still has the wrong information. So we've updated all of our forms internally, but the Secretary of State understands that many counties and organizations have quite a bit of the old forms. You can still use them, and you could still explain to the person the law, and that's done in, these are still old forms, but we're still going to process them. It's not going to be invalidated.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the parolees? Because I'm not sure that's clear. I've actually heard parolees say, I'm not allowed to vote. And they are.
Well, we'll be starting to identify probation and parolee offices to put posters, because they are allowed to vote.
Exactly.
So the problem we have is we don't know who they are. So we need to get the information and the outreach out there that will trigger them to say, oh, I need to register, because otherwise we don't know who they are. If they're out of jail, they're out on parole, but we have no record of them. So we're thinking that probably the best way to target these folks is to have big, colorful posters at parole offices. And we're working with advocacy groups to also identify other appropriate locations to put posters to inform parolees of their right to register and vote.
Do you know, it might be possible to ask the newspapers to do a story on it too, because the public doesn't know. And I was actually at a voter registration event one time where a man in the crowd said, "Oh, you're not allowed to vote." When the guy said, "Well, I'm a parolee. I don't know if I can vote or not." And it was like, guys, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's going to be just an education thing and trying to push out accurate information. But if there's any thoughts in the room, we're interested. I mean, we think targeting locations is probably the best thing we can do, is have voter registrations and posters at parole offices and other locations.
Over to Karen.
Yeah. A question came in early when you were showing some of the demographic information about voter registration regarding the low voter registration on the county's military bases. Can you speak to that? Is that unusual? Are they registered in some other way, or is that an area that's under registered?
It's an interesting question, because we probably have about 11,000 military overseas, but they're not stationed here necessarily. So typically in the military, they have a total right to register here in San Diego County, but typically they're registered wherever they consider their domicile, wherever they plan to return after their military service. So probably looking at that data isn't going to be too helpful. We could look at maybe the data register. Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to be it's not going to tell the story of what's truly happening, because many of the people who may be deployed here or living here in military service are registered elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So we do work closely with the voting officers at the installations to make sure the information is shared, and that they should be registered, whether it's here in the county they're living for the time being or at home. We do work with the voting officers to get that information out there.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I'll just comment on a personal note how valuable I think that citing tool is from the Center for Inclusive Democracy. And as those of us are looking in the league in areas where we can go in and help support to increase voter registration and voter turnout, I think it's a great opportunity for us to target some areas through our own efforts and in conjunction with other community groups to really target some of those areas for our efforts. So
great.
Thank you. Anne?
Okay, Cynthia, Next question. In the past, there were poll watchers who could check who has voted and then get out the vote activities. Lists were posted at each poll. Is there any replacement for that, which was also used to verify voter eligibility?
Right. So we're looking at now everything's more automated. We have the electronic poll book, which has every registered voter in the county. So now it's more going to be displayed on a screen. We're still we go back and forth between displaying it on a tablet or a laptop or something similar to the e-poll book. But the process will be a little bit different. So it'll be displayed on a screen. If the poll watcher is interested in a certain street or neighborhood or city, we would have to pull up those appropriate precincts. And then they could go about the same way they've done it in the past, whether they take a quick picture of it so they can go and get out the vote. It's just going to look a little differently. It's not going to be a piece of paper taped on the wall.
Got it. Actually, it might be more convenient. But now, so you could actually have them sorted by the street or not the street, or maybe the street or the precinct or whatever.
Yeah, it's the street index. So it's usually by street.
That's even better than the paper.
Well, the paper was like that too, but it was only for that precinct.
Yeah.
And it was just taped on the wall.
That's amazing. Technology is amazing. There's no getting away from it. It's just amazing.
All right. If a disabled voter goes to the voting center, will someone be able to come out to their car with their ballot so they can vote from their car?
We actually wheel out the ballot marking device. And that we used in 2020 as well, quite effectively. So we have it's our ADA cart. It's a little blue cart at each of the vote centers. We set up the printer, the ballot marking device, and it can be wheeled out to the car, and the person can just right outside their door mark their ballot.
Okay. I have it's somewhat related question. You mentioned that voters can request a ballot through the remote accessible vote by mail system. How do they do that, and what kind of lead time does that involve? Because we will often get a call the day before or the day of saying, I need help voting. So can you talk about the process for that?
So if it's more of an emergency situation, then I would want them to call and get in touch with our vote by mail staff so they could set it up immediately. Like if it's election day and we need to get you a ballot, maybe you immediately had to leave your home to go care for a sick relative, we can get you that ballot. So that I would say needs to be a phone call. If it's kind of unplanned, get a hold of our office so we can set up the system and explain what you need to do. If you're a disabled person, if say you're blind and you want to sign up for this, it's probably, any time is okay, but as much lead time as possible would be great, because then we can suspend mailing you the paper ballot and just set up your remote accessible vote by mail ballot. So if it could be set up 30 days in advance, 6 weeks in advance, that would be great. That would probably be ideal. You can also sign up for it. There's a postcard on the back of your voter information pamphlet. You can sign up there and send it back. You could also sign up on our website under remote accessible vote by mail. There's a form that you can sign up. You must have a good email address. And what we're trying to discourage, and why we try to emphasize that really the purpose of this is for our military overseas voters, to get them a ballot if they're in some remote location, or for accessibility, so people can use their own assistive technology at home to mark their ballot. It's in no way is a way to electronically submit your ballot. It's a paper ballot, just like every other ballot. You must have a printer and you must print out your paper ballot. You must enclose that into an envelope. You must put the template, like glue the template onto the envelope and sign your name, just like any other mail ballot. It comes back to us, it's tracked, we signature check, and then we move it forward for counting. So I think there might be some confusion out there that now that it's open to everyone, they think it's like, oh, well, I could just vote online. And no, it's not that at all.
No. Okay, can you review the app available for tracking your ballot?
Where's My Ballot? So we do have two options. Sometimes our little internal tool for verifying receipt of your ballot is a little faster than Where's My Ballot sometimes. So if you come to our website, go to the drop-down menu, I want to verify my receipt of my ballot. You can enter some information there and it'll simply tell you that we've received it back and it's being processed. Where's My Ballot works really well if you're mailing it through the US Postal Service because it's utilizing that Postal Service barcode. So you'll receive alerts, either text, voice messages, or emails as your ballot is moving through the mail, either to you or back to our office. Some people use Where's My Ballot and they drop it in one of our official drop boxes, and then they get irritated because they're not receiving an immediate response to that. Well, there's no magic barcode reader in that drop box.
Yeah,
So,
I do MBDO every time. And last time there was a woman who was just over the moon about how her ballot had been tracked. And it was just great. I mean, she was so excited about it. The whole library had to listen about, she went on and on about how I got this and then I got that. And it was just so exciting, you know. And it was like, okay, we got it. Thank you. But she was so pleased. It was wonderful. It made me happy just to hear her, you know, go on and on.
So we do try to tell people that if they're using Where's My Ballot, and that's through the Secretary of State's office through ballot tracks. If they're using that and they're dropping it at a ballot drop box, one of our locations, to give it a few days, because that's going to have to come back to our office and get run through our mail sorting machine before it actually would trigger a notification. So it's not like the US Postal Service, where it's every move in that system is scanning that barcode.
Right.
So there is
I understand, but I just thought it was so charming that she was so thrilled.
Good.
You had mentioned that there are very few circumstances in which a provisional ballot would still be required. Can you explain when it might still be needed?
Conditional voter registration. So if you're showing up to a vote center and registering for the first time, that will still go in an envelope. We also have situations where we're seeing that your mail ballot has been returned, but you're giving the poll worker a hard time. So we never want the poll workers to feel uncomfortable or threatened. So it's better just vote provisionally, let the voter vote, and then we'll figure it out back here.
Great.
But for the most part, provisional voting goes away. You can go anywhere. So there is no wrong location. You still can't vote in other counties though. You can't just go to Orange County and go to one of their vote centers and vote. We're not there yet.
Maybe that day will come. Who knows?
Just might.
Okay. Have you ever thought about figuring out how much it costs for the Registrar of Voters in the county to do a mail ballot type of voting versus an in-person polling place ballot? Has anybody ever figured that out? Because the numbers sound really skewed towards the mailing. being a much cheaper option.
You know, we have done that. We did a feasibility study in 2019, which we have that report that kind of does that comparison. It will never be a viable option for large countywide elections. You have to have that in-person voting option. There are people, because of being in a language minority group or accessibility, needing certain accessibility assistance, that in-person voting must always be available. So state law will not allow that at this point. There are, for special elections, where a jurisdiction, if it's under a population of 100,000, that they could do all vote by mail. And that makes sense. When it's that small of a jurisdiction, we could do all vote by mail and have ballot drop boxes available along with the US Postal Service. But that, yes, we have done that comparison. But I don't see it as a viable option just to not have in-person voting available.
How long will the citing tool be available, and will you be accepting suggestions for locations of the vote centers and the ballot box placements?
The comment period ends March 6th. So we do have that updated list on our website to take a look at, of what we've been able to confirm so far. And then you could still provide suggestions up until 5 p.m. on March 6th.
Thanks. I would encourage everybody who knows their neighborhood to take a look at that and submit those suggestions. It's interesting, for one thing, but very important input for the registrar. So
yes, definitely. We're always looking, we rely on school locations quite a bit, and they don't necessarily want us there. So, so if there are alternatives out there, we would love for that to be brought to our attention. We'd love to go and survey them.
Great. I think that, let's see, if there are any other last questions. Anne, are you seeing anything?
Yeah, I have one more for you. Are the county libraries going to be mail ballot drop-off locations again this election, all of them? And the San Diego Public Library?
Yes, so we do have a pretty robust mail ballot drop-off through the libraries, a pretty robust program, again, for June. I don't want to say that it's all, but we will, the amended plan will be posted on February 21st, and that will have the draft list of proposed locations.
Okay.
So yeah, it will be a lot of libraries again. Then we will continue moving forward with citing locations for these permanent 24-hour drop boxes. And that'll probably be in November.
Thank you, Cynthia. I personally want to thank you for coming. I thought it was a wonderful presentation. And I think we're so lucky in California that we have these options to vote. Karen and I are doing a talk tomorrow on voter suppression. And, you know, the contrast between what California does and some of our other states is so astounding that it's hard for me to remain nonpartisan, frankly, because it's so remarkable, the contrast between our, you know, California tries so hard to help people to vote and other states don't. Some, not all, but some other states.
I'd also like to thank you, Cynthia. Appreciate it. Before I let everybody go and adjourn, I'd just like to remind you of an upcoming meeting, a joint webinar next week, next Wednesday. The date is February 23rd at 11:30. There will be a webinar on the future of single family housing. the new California laws, SB 9. So please join us for that. And again, thank you very much, Cynthia. We appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing to work with you as we all get out there and educate and engage our voters this year. So thank you. Thank you all for
so
coming.
much.
Thank you, Cynthia. You were wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.